خاورمیانه در تغییر، ایران، کمپشرف و ایالات متحده. 26 آوریل 2011، 6 اردیبهشت 1390.
Actually, I've spent about 30 some odd years, my entire adult life actually involved in, I'm a career military officer, special forces officer, but most of my career has been involved in counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, counter-narcotics, and law enforcement. Over the Iran hostage crisis, and it was the beginning of my career. I've been following the Iranian regime over the last 30 some odd years, and I just want to make a few comments about them because I think it's important to have context, which is about the decision of the foreign terrorist organizations, or MEK, because it's done in a political context. And let me try to give you a few of my thoughts about the Iranian regime and what they've been up to over the last 30 years and what I expect them to do over the next few years. First of all, let me tell you about the nature, how I consider the regime. I consider the regime a rational one. I do not consider themselves mad. They've been at this for 30 years. They know exactly what they're doing. They're ruthless, they're cunning, they're violent, they're thuggish, and they push the envelope of what's accepted international behavior. But they're also cowardly when pushed back upon, and they do respond to pressure. This is why I always argue that they're a rational regime, because they do react to pressure. They do respond to activities against them. You know, the Iranian support for terrorism really, like most of the things they do, is reactive to events. They didn't create Hezbollah. Hezbollah was created in South Beirut in 1982 and 1983. It was formalized in 1984. They jumped on that bandwagon and provided thousands of trainings, hundreds of millions of dollars, probably billions of dollars to Hezbollah over the last 20 years in support of their terrorist activity as a proxy for their interests in that part of the world. They will use terrorism as an instrument, but as all of you know, in flat-out murder, as they killed dissidents in the 80s and 90s in Europe, in the European capitals, Paris, in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Turkey particularly, murdered Iranian dissidents with their agents all over Europe in the 80s and 90s. Finally, fortunately, they never did it in the United States, but the European governments were finally disgusted by this because they got caught, really. A lot too many Iranian operatives. And the European government finally put pressure on them. They stopped that activity. And perhaps they just killed off enough of the dissidents. It was really a horrible period of history. They also conducted, with the support of Hezbollah operatives, 2 terrorist attacks in Argentina in 1992 and 1994. And, of course, it was the Iranian intelligence, the MOIS, who was directly involved in the attack in June of 1996 against Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia. So they have used terrorism, international terrorism, as an instrument. They don't want to get caught in that type of blatant terrorism event like they did in 92, 94, and 96. They've also gone back to that playbook, and that is their primary playbook. Find opportunities to pursue their interests in the region and globally by funding, training, and indoctrinating militia groups that will do the dirty work for them. And that's obviously what they've been doing in Iraq. General McChrystal and General Petraeus were very articulate on this, of how the Iranian Quds forces of the IRGC were actively training, supporting, and arming groups that were killing American soldiers in Iraq. They also, which is very odd as well, got involved in supporting the Taliban. At the same time, Ahmadinejad was meeting with Karzai. His thugs were training Taliban that were trying to kill Karzai. So they play this double game even when leaders of the region know it, and particularly their neighbors in Iraq and Afghanistan. They know they're playing a double game, but they still do it in order to leverage, pressure, intimidate, and terrorize the leadership around their region. Let me talk a little bit about the MEKs. That's really why I'm here. Is I'm one of those evil State Department guys who was at blame for much. I am not an apologist for the State Department. Of my 30 years in government, I was there for about 3 of the years. But I did serve on the National Security Council under 2 administrations, in Bush 41 and Clinton, and I also served in the Pentagon and different places before I finished at NYPD a few years back. We designate state sponsors of terrorists, and And, of course, Iran is number one and Syria is number two on that list. Really the two only countries that are actively involved in supporting terrorism right now. Even the North Koreans, as wacky as they are, the Sudanese, they've really diminished their support for terrorism. Those are the two that are most active. That process is fundamentally a political process. The courts have intervened. Secretary Clinton has said we will review. It's taking a long time. I would hope that the facts will prevail. Allow this process to move forward. It's a legal process. It's an analytical process, and I hope that they move forward on this issue expeditiously. So thank you very much and for inviting me here today and sharing a few thoughts about this whole process.